Hey, what's going on YouTube? And welcome back to all my cloud scholars out there. My name is Kieran Tross, and I want to thank you for clicking on this video. In today's video, our topic is how you can effectively secure your Microsoft Entra environment. And what I want to do is give you some key security configurations that you can implement to manage and secure your identities. So my goal here with this video is to provide you some key security highlights, right? So that this way that if you have a project in your environment, then you can approach it and break it down into certain subcategories. So we're going to be talking about different ways of managing the identities, privilege roles, and things of that nature. So what I plan on doing is grouping security recommendations into certain areas so that this way you can logically break down projects into consumable chunks. So the first item that we're going to go into is privileged accounts that are only cloud native. So one of the reasons why we want to have privileged accounts that are cloud only is because just the way your on-premise accounts are set up and configured. What do I mean by that? You may have domain controllers that are out of date. And if they have domain controls that are out of date or not patched correctly, then that could leave you a bad day at work. So one of the best things that you can do is have some privileged accounts that are in the cloud only. If someone, a threat actor, I should say, gets access to your on-premise account, what they can do from there is they can manipulate your Microsoft Entra settings, right? So, and that's one of the reasons why we want to make sure that you have privileged accounts that are cloud only. So this way you have the right system and configurations and then also the right monitoring for those systems. Next, we want to talk about registering privileged accounts with phishing resistant methods. So what we want to first identify is the privileged accounts that we have in the cloud, and we want to make sure that the methods that we have for them in terms of authentication are the ones that are phishing resistant, right? So if they're privileged accounts, we really don't want to do anything with username and passwords anymore. We really would like to go ahead and implement phishing resistant methods. So that this way we authenticate not with what we know, but something that we have. So Microsoft Entra ID offers the following phishing resistant passwordless authentication options. So you have passkeys, right? You have your Windows Hello for Business, your platform credentials for Mac OS, which is in preview. You have your Microsoft Authenticator app passkeys. You have your FIDO security keys as well. Plus, you also have certificate-based authentication smart cards. So registration and a passwordless sign-in isn't required by Microsoft, but they do recommend using a P1 license for your deployment. All right, the next recommendation, not to get confused with the previous one, is that your privileged users are signing in with phishing resistant method. Okay, so not to confuse with the previous step, the other one was the methods. Now this one is actually having your privileged users sign in with these methods. Without phishing resistant authentication methods, users are more susceptible to attacks, especially if you have a privileged role or a privileged account, I should say. So with these accounts, it really shouldn't be your account that you have for your emails. I would definitely tell you not to do that. If you have an account for your email, which we all have, you should have another account that is your system administrator account, or also known as the SA account. That account shouldn't be known to the world. It really shouldn't follow the same naming convention that you have for your normal account. So you would have like a first name dot last name, a first initial dot last name, followed by your company domain. With your privileged account, what you will want to do is have an account which probably has some numbers and letters associated with it that doesn't even have any correlation to your main account. That is one of the best ways of you going about with setting up these type of account. Now, let's talk about some remediation steps if you do have it. So one of the things you want to do is ensure that privileged accounts register and use phishing resistant methods. You also want to do is deploy conditional access policies to target privileged accounts. And then finally, you want to monitor the authentication. The next recommendation for our Microsoft Entra security is blocking legacy authentication. All right, so legacy authentication such as SMTP or IMAP don't support MFA. And if you don't have MFA, it makes it much easier for you to get hacked. So users tend to not want to have their passwords changed. So what do I mean by that? So they will have a password for their Yahoo or Gmail account, and then they'll have the same password for their work. And if their Yahoo or Gmail account gets compromised, then you can guess what's going to happen next. The threat actor can easily go on LinkedIn, see where they work at, find out the naming format for their company, sign in, and then get through. So legacy authentication should definitely be blocked. You should make sure that you have a conditional access policy that is blocking legacy authentication for your whole tenant. The next recommendation is privilege Microsoft Entra built-in roles are targeted with conditional access policies. So what you're basically going to do here is make sure that all privileged roles have a conditional access policy applied to them. So if you have any of these roles, you're going to have to follow some type of MFA or some type of workflow that you need to establish who you are or what you have. So if we are talking about FIDO keys, then let's go ahead with FIDO keys. So anything that is a privileged role within Microsoft Entra, you should have a conditional access policy to wrap that around. The next recommendation to securing your Microsoft Entra is application management. Attackers may go after active applications that are inactive. So those applications that are really there in your environment that are just sitting around, but they're no longer in use. The project is probably over and there was nobody who came through and said, all right, let me disable this application. So you really want to pay attention to those applications because you may have an application that is still active, no one's using, and you may have certain individuals still having access to that application. Now that could be a FTE, a full-time employee, or that could be a contractor. And if a contractor still has access to it, you don't know exactly how that contractor left the organization or even departed the company that they work for. And if they departed the company that they work for and it happened in a very bad way, then they may be out for blood. So you want to make sure that you are watching and monitoring all your applications and making sure that they are valid applications. So let's talk a little bit about some of the remediation steps. So one is disable privileged service principals. Then we can investigate if the application has legitimate use cases. Also, if the service principal doesn't have legitimate use case, delete it, and then move applications from shared secrets to manage identities. So the next recommendation is to make sure applications don't have certificates that last longer than 180 days. So long-lived certificates are most likely to be exposed over time. This is one of the reasons why when you're talking to your security folks in your environment or you're reaching out to a security firm, when it comes to certificates, they have a time frame there. So you would set up these processes when you set up applications, and when you have certificates, you want to make sure that these certificates need to be renewed after a certain time frame. Over 180 days is a bit too long. You might want to do something every 90 days and then have a process in place or some type of notification to say, okay, we need to renew the certificate to make sure that your application can still function. So that is one of the best ways of going about making sure that you are managing your certificates in the right way. All right, the next one is creating new applications and service principals is restricted to privileged users. Okay, so this is one of the security hardening when it comes to Azure. So what you really want to do is make sure that whoever is able to create an application or create a service principal is the right individual. So you want to limit that capability, that function, to only certain individuals in your organization. So let's talk a little bit about some of the remediation steps in order to do that. And this is a quick one because it's all it is block non-privileged users from creating apps. The next item that I want to talk about is external collaboration. All right, this one should be very simple and easy to follow. Guests can't invite other guests. There's no way somebody's going to come to your house and then invite somebody else to your house. They're going to have to ask you first, right? Or else you're going to get really upset. So my thing is, when it comes to Microsoft Entra, you want to make sure that the guests that you have in your organization aren't able to allow other guests to get in there. You want to prevent that functionality. So let's talk a little bit about the remediation steps. So one is just a simple one, which is restrict who can invite guests to only users assigned to specific admin roles. The next recommendation is guests have restricted access to directory objects. Okay, so I'm going to continue with the home analogy. So if somebody comes to your house, they're probably going to stay in the living room or probably go to the basement if you go to the basement, or if you're showing them around the house, they're walking around with you. That is exactly how this is being approached, but a little bit more restrictive. So what you're doing here is making sure that your guest users do not have access to read your whole Microsoft Entra directory and see all types of user information. Because what happens is if that guest user gets compromised, and then that threat actor gets into your system, they're able to view and see everything that's going on in your environment. So for guest accounts, we want to always make sure that we are keeping those accounts monitored and restricted. So let's talk a little bit about the remediation steps. So restrict guest access to their own directory objects. So here's our final step, and that is all about monitoring your Azure environment. So when it comes to monitoring, this is how you would go about doing that, is by making sure that your diagnostic settings are being sent to the right area. And what do I mean by that? So when it comes to Microsoft Entra, you have the ability to send your sign-in logs and other logs to 3 different areas. That could be a storage account, that could also be a log analytics workspace, or that can go to an event hub. The event hub would act as an intermediary going to your SIM tool. It could be a third-party tool like Splunk. But either way, you want to make sure you are monitoring who has access to your Microsoft Entra tenant. So this way, if anything does happen, you are able to catch those logs and have some type of remediation happen to make sure you are safeguarding your environment. So what are the remediation actions? 1, configure Microsoft Entra diagnostic settings. Then you also are integrate Microsoft Entra logs with Azure Monitor logs. And then you also can stream Microsoft Entra logs to an event hub. All right, folks, those are my recommendations to securing your Microsoft Entra tenant. I hope that you found the video to be beneficial. Please do me a favor. Please hit that like and subscribe button. If you have any questions or anything like that, please let me know. As always, my goal here at Cloud Scholars is to get you from scholar to consultant, and of course, consultant to expert. Thank you, and see you next time.